Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Every day there's something new. Every day you go, how much further, how much worse, how crazier can the Republican folk take us? Saw the story today, Donald Trump. Now understand, former president of the United States, publicly siding with a dictator of an adversary, while at the same time you got a congresswoman saying, yeah, we should have civil war. I'm in this weird kind of, you remember the America First people? You remember the flag waving folk? You remember them? You remember Country First? You remember that? Wow. What a day. Yeah, Donald Trump defended the North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un, and criticized our having a joint military operation with the South Koreans. He said Kim Jong-un of North Korea, who I got to know, remember, love letters, and got along with very well during my years as president, is not happy with the U.S. and South Korea doing big training and air exercises together. He feels threatened. Even I would constantly complain that the South Korea pays us very little to do these extremely expensive and provocative drills. It's really ridiculous. Now understand, the idea of holding these joint drills is because North Korea is an enemy. And that's kind of the point. So that you go, hey, how about not shooting nukes at us? How about not shooting nukes across the line there into the South? How about, not? And yet we've got a former president publicly defending publicly calling, I don't know what the thought process is here. But again, I guess I'm not supposed to. I mean, you've got a Republican Party right now torn. As I'm reading the reports, there's a Republican Party that's torn over supporting Putin and Russia or us. And I'm going, I never thought I would live to see the day that would be what's in front of us. Now, look, understand, we've always had the Southern folks who want to refight the Civil War. In fact, one of the first conversations I had when I moved to the area that I live in was with a guy who was a Civil War enactor. Had the big blue X up on his pole and everything. And, this the war of northern aggression, and the South's going to rise, all that stuff. And not surprising. Look, this is not new. Republicans have been flirting with this and dangling the carrot out in front of a lot of these folks for a very long time. I mean, I look at presidential hopeful Nikki Haley, who it's now been uncovered again that back in 2010, she defended states and their right to secede. She defended South Carolina for its Confederacy History Month and the Confederate flag flying out in front of the Capitol. And again, political expedience. And again, this is one of those moments where you go, does she believe this? To her core, is this a truly sincere, my favorite phrase from the sincerely held belief. Is this one of those? This is one of those sincerely held things? Or is this just BS that plays to the base? Now, I don't know about Nikki Haley. I'm not sure which side of this she's on. I know she said it. I know that the words came out of her mouth. I don't know if she really to her core believes it. Now, when I hear, people like Marjorie Three Names, when I hear Marjorie Taylor Greene say, we need a national divorce, which is the new code for civil war, it makes me go, she knows exactly what she's saying. And I believe she wants that. And it's gotten some interesting responses because I said, look, the reality is the way the federal government takes money in from all the states and then divvies it back out, redistributes it. Southern states, red states, they take more from the federal government than they put in. That's a fact. That's just the reality of how things work out. In fact, one poll showed 7 of the top 10 states being red states that take more from the federal government. Another one, because of how they view Maine, said 7. However you view Maine as a red state or a blue state or somewhere in between. So we'll say 7.5 of the top 10 are red states. And I simply said that, hey, I'm in favor of cutting that off, that you shouldn't get more than you put in, and that the excess money should be put into reserve. Maybe pay the debt off. I mean, that's something that red state leadership scream about. That's something that Republicans are losing their minds over. So how about we not give those states the excess and we pay our bills at home? How about that? Now, that's not going to fly because, these red states have been on the welfare wagon for quite some time. But they love pitching that, it's the welfare queen. They've been trying to bring the welfare queen back. And you remember the Reagan era welfare queen, the black woman with 17 kids driving around in the topless, pink Cadillac, drinking, Dom Perignon, eating steak every night off of your dime. Remember that? Again, never found her, along with the small family farmer who lost his farm because of the estate tax. But it paints a picture. So today when I got the response, I got a bunch of responses from people. When I said this, the response that came out that I found interesting is that, does this mean, when we have this national divorce, the red states are going to be red states and the blue states are going to be the woke states. And they'll have all of this woke stuff, a bunch of lazy people who don't want to work. That's their framing. And the belief that and it came out and someone said the quiet part out loud. That, all those black people who take more than they give, they'll move to the blue states. And I'm going, I don't think that's going to happen. I think those people love the states they live in, and they're going to fight for their heritage and their roots just like anybody else. Because understand, there are no absolutely pure red states or absolutely blue states. There's a lot of people on all sides. And this kind of talk is about tearing us apart. This kind of talk is about ripping us to shreds. I found it interesting that a descendant of Robert E. Lee actually came out and said Marjorie Trainwreck Greene's comments were, what did he say, treasonous? Because he understands, the family lineage understands what she's saying. But it comes back to this idea, and look, it's the war between the states has been going on for a very long time, and Republicans have been winning it. Because someone reminded me that, all the farm subsidies go to these red states. All of the military bases that got shut down during the BRAC commissions, a lot of them were in blue states and saved because they needed the jobs. A lot of federal investment go to southern and red states because those folks understand. You got to bring home the bacon. You got to make sure that you fight for the workers in your area. And it's one of those things where someone had said to me, if you pulled all that money out, these areas would collapse. And I agree. You pull the federal money out of a lot of these red states, and their economies would collapse because food stamps, the reverberation effect is off the charts. When money goes to the local grocer, it then reverberates through the entire economy. But we can't talk about that because the quote unquote producers, they feel that they're entitled. If you want to talk about real entitlement of reform, how about we talk about all the subsidies we give to corporations and we give to the very wealthy? How about we talk about that? But that's not what this is about. This is an ideological realignment. And what they want to live in their little ideological paradise. They want to be around people just like them. And to be honest, there's part of me, just from a pure, mental kind of a exercise, I would love to play that game out and see where it goes. Now, there have been moments of the past, and I point to, I guess it was maybe about 10 years ago or so, maybe a little bit longer. But I remember back in 2020, there was a story about Grafton, New Hampshire. And Grafton, New Hampshire was, it was one of the libertarian, wet dream list places to visit. And there was a push in New Hampshire to get all these libertarians and these free staters to go and to move, to take over a state, to do exactly what Marjorie Three Names wants, to really make a state as crazy and as right-wing and, live free or die, that kind of stuff is the state motto. That whole curmudgeon, nobody's going to tell me what to do. Screw the government, screw those authority types. I'm going to do what I want to do. And they did. they moved to Grafton and they got rid of all those onerous rules and regulations, and people could do whatever they want. You know, they go to Grafton. They said, feed the feed the bears. Boxes of donuts. They said, go to Grafton. Don't put lids on your garbage cans. They said, because it's my right. It's my right to do whatever I want, and do whatever you want, they said. And what I find interesting is the story. This is the funny story here. They wiped away all these rules that were in place to help keep the giant bears from coming and taking over the town. So as you were the nice lady feeding the bears the donuts, and you missed a day, are you surprised that the bear is now in your living room eating you? When the garbage cans don't have a lid on it, are you surprised at 2:00 in the morning that they're digging into and causing a mess and a ruckus? Are you surprised at and that when you don't have simple rules and regulations in place that are meant to prevent certain behaviors that have predictable outcomes, that you have chaos? And this is, again, these people they have this, I'm going to live in a place, people just like me, as crazy as I am, without understanding that the sad reality is we don't all get to do whatever we want, whenever we want, however we want. We live in a society with others. And this is where the weird moment is, because, as we start down this road, how crazy now this is where I would love to see some of this exercise. I would like to see ideological places of all, white evangelical crazy people in one spot, as woke as you can get over here. You got Wokistan over there. And I would love to see how they interact and figure out how to exist. Now, the thing I got all the time is, the red states create all the food. No, they don't. There's a lot of mythology. There's a lot of belief that is so wrong. California is the largest food producer in the country. So, by a lot. And the amount of food produced by the red and blue states are about the same. This idea that the red states are the producers is ludicrous. But again, you got this belief because you've got a media structure that keeps feeding this poison. And it used to be in the past that this stuff was always out there. Because look, I've been talking about, making a provision to say you don't get more than you put in. If you're against ensuring that you have a social safety net, if you're against education for all, if you're against a bunch of stuff, we shouldn't be giving you a bunch of federal dollars. If all you're going to do is take the tax breaks that we're giving you to invest in things, like healthcare, education, people, and you give it to a handful of rich people, I'm sorry, we can use that money better somewhere else. Bad policy should not be rewarded. And I've been saying this for years. The difference was years ago, we didn't have as crazy of leadership. And my problem is with our leadership. People like Marjorie Three Names and Boebert, people like Gosar and Gomert, people like my Congressman Scott Pardon Me Perry. These are people who are they're not leaders. Most of them are attention seekers. Hey, look at me. But most of them are ideologues bought and paid for by the handful, the wealthy. And the working class always gets screwed. Because here's the thing. The people who are saying, those people are going to move to the woke states, implying that lazy people will go to blue states because blue states have a better social safety net. We take care of people a lot better. The implication is that, all the welfare lazy people will go and be in the blue states, and it's ludicrous. Because again, we know, food stamp programs overwhelmingly go to red states in big ways because they have a lot of poor people. And my problem with this whole divorce idea, I know who gets hurt. It's not Marjorie Greene. It's not Lauren Boebert. It's not any of the people calling for this stuff. It's poor people. It's working people. And this ideological nonsense, because the majority of the country doesn't want to see the United States being the 6 countries that everyone claims we are, because that leads to, war. Because I'm reminded, red states got more guns. Maybe. I think the blue state folk are catching up. But is that the country we want to live in? And is this the image we want to project? Everyone agrees. We got problems internationally. Russia, China. This kind of division at home, not helpful. Not at all. And to have national leaders calling for civil war, have a former president siding with a foreign dictator, we are definitely not on the right track. Want to hear your thoughts. Would a divorce be possible? I guess, is there a possible way to divorce us from each other? Maybe something Marjorie of Three Names knows a little bit about here recently. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I talked about federal entitlements and how a lot of these southern states, they feel entitled to it. All the military bases we've left open in these red states, all of the federal investment, all of the money that's gone down there. And let's not forget all of the Social Security and Medicare. Remember, the entitlements. I found it interesting that former Speaker of the House, former Republican Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, angry at both Biden and Trump for putting the financial risk of the country at financial risk because they've sworn off changes to Medicare and Social Security. He said, Biden and Trump, I lumped them in the same sentence. Biden and Trump are doing the opposite of leadership. They're trying to scare people, and they're playing political demagoguery with one of the most important issues facing our country this century. Yeah, stealing Social Security and Medicare from Granny evidently is the most important issue. Now, remember, the Republicans freaked out at the State of the Union. And because nobody's ever called for us to destroy Social Security and Medicare. Nobody ever has. I had people saying, name one person, and I would name 10. And they, name one more. And then I'll name one more, Mike Pence. Evidently, Pence is now out saying that we need to do some things. He said we're looking at a debt crisis in this country over the next 25 years that's driven by entitlements, and nobody in D.C. wants to talk about it. It should be on the table, and he's got this whole long term we should talk about it. So kids, that means you. If you're under 40, that means you. They're going to screw you out of Social Security because, hey, they've created this crisis, and Republicans never miss an opportunity to use a good crisis. And this is one of those things where you go, how does this happen? This happens because the wealthy want it. Now, I go back to the George Carlin bit. Some 20 years ago, where he was saying, look, they want your Social Security money. They're going to get it. They're going to get it back. And they're going to give it to their criminal friends on Wall Street. This has always been the play. The play has always been privatization. The play has always been to take money out of your paycheck, to put into a risky plan to say, let my hedge fund take care. You'll be fine until the next collapse. Privatization has never worked out the way they've sold it. But again, we keep, like the idiot who walks up to the guy with the 3 cards and thinks he's gonna, this time I'm going to beat the dealer. you never beat the 3-card monte dealer. Never. And this is it. They're selling us snake oil. And they're doing it because this is what the wealthy want. And I point to Ron DeSantis, who evidently just got a 7-figure donation from Jeffrey Yaz, the trader, investor, whatever, education destroyer, whatever you want to call him. Gave him $2.5 million to their state political committee in the name of Friends of Ron DeSantis. Also, DeSantis got $1 million each from Jude and Christopher Reyes. Again, these are the wealthy of the wealthy in this country, choosing who they want to be in power positions so they can do what? Oh, yeah, whatever they want them to. And, this is one of those weird kind of moments where you go, they have to divide us. They have to pit us against each other. There's no way forward for them. I say all the time, we've outprocreated them. There are more of us. They may have all the money, and that's true, but there's more of us. So what do you have to do? You have to divide and conquer. Not rocket science. Don't need to be a genius. Don't need to have a crystal ball or a law degree from some Ivy League university. But the more we fight over nonsense, the more we're I look at some of the comments, and I know social media isn't reality. Social media is full of people who are the worst versions of themselves, most of the time just trying to make the other person look bad. And I it's interesting. It's really interesting, the number of people who are now experts with, little blue check marks who have like 3 followers. There's something to that, and we'll get to that later. But it's one of those things where face-to-face talk stuff, you don't get into this kind of mud. And there's an opportunity. I think face-to-face, people want to find common ground. When you believe there's some anonymity and you're behind a curtain, that's when you're going to be a lot more willing to be disagreeable. And maybe we do need to come back into the square. Maybe we need to talk to people face-to-face. I tell my kids all the time, when we were kids, we worked things out. There were no parents, there were no cameras, there were no police, there were just a bunch of kids. And you learned your place, you learned what you could say, what you couldn't say. As I've said, when we stopped letting little 5-year-old boys beat each other up in the sandbox, things went off the deep end. Because that respect is gone. And I go back to this whole talk about we're going to secede. It's nonsense. It's idiot talk. It's never going to happen, and the majority of the country doesn't want it to happen. But you know what they can do with it? They can pit us against each other with it. So you go, oh, those lazy blue states or those lazy red states, and they can get us. Look, I don't want a national divorce. This country is only as great as the weakest Marjorie Trainwreck, Lauren Gun Fetish Barbie, any of them. They are literally tearing us down. Our job is to ignore the noise and move forward. That's what we need to be working on. That's what we need to be focusing on. Rebuilding, reviving, reuniting, reunionizing, sharing the wealth, building for the future. That's what we need to be doing. But I guess it is fun to have this exercise and this mental game around, what if we did get a divorce? Still lunacy. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2004. That was the day Secretary of Education Rod Page stated that he considered the National Education Association to be a terrorist organization. He made the remarks during a meeting with governors who were visiting the White House. His apology a few hours later was just as inflammatory. There he expressed his frustration at the, quote, obstructionist scare tactics the NEA's Washington Washington lobbyists have employed against No Child Left Behind's historic reforms. Representing almost 3 million educators, the NEA had been fighting many aspects of the No Child Left Behind Act passed by Congress in 2001. The teachers' unions had initially supported the measure, but they came to realize that the act was designed to undermine public education in favor of charter, private, and religious schools. No Child Left Behind mandated regular standardized testing of students. It also threatened financial penalties and school closures. Governors on board with the goals of the act soon grew frustrated. The Bush administration reneged on federal funding necessary for its implementation. The union movement was outraged at Page's smear. John Sweeney, then president of the AFL-CIO, said, quote, "The Bush administration would like to label all those who disagree with it as terrorists in order to cover up its policies, which are harmful to working families and to divert attention from its inability to create good jobs." By 2015, the No Child Left Behind Act had received so much criticism from every corner that the Every Student Succeeds Act replaced it. This act retains Common Core standards but transfers school accountability to the states. It is now pending review under President Donald Trump's Regulatory Freeze Directive. In 2017, it was pending review under President Donald Trump's Regulatory Freeze Directive.
No one needs another outrage to worry about, but here's one that could literally be your last worry. Our hospitals are killing us. Not that the staffers are going room to room snuffing out patients, of course, but hospital owners and top executives are nonetheless killing thousands of ill Americans entrusted to their care. They are doing it by deliberately short-staffing their facilities and short-changing sick and injured people they're richly paid to serve. At the core of this outrage is a fatal structural flaw in our healthcare system, namely that these are no longer our hospitals. Instead of being public or nonprofit entities for the common good, focused squarely on patients, hospitals today tend to be private operations controlled by corporate profiteers. Pitting patients against profits is no way to run a hospital, for it means money will ultimately rule over health and over life itself. Ask a nurse. These dedicated professionals are the solid pillars of American health. More than doctors and way more than administrators, nurses make a hospital function, providing the primary care and constant on-site monitoring that are the essence of an ethical, healthy system. Yet, thousands have already fled the work they love. Another third plan to leave this year, and thousands more are going on strike. Why? Because the profit system demands massive staff cuts, leaving way too few nurses to meet the basic needs of patients, causing burnout among nurses and unnecessary deaths of people they care for. A damning 2021 study revealed that forcing fewer nurses to tend to an ever larger caseload effectively killed more than 4,000 New York hospital patients in the previous 2 years alone. This is Jim Hightower saying, yet the corporate powers insist on treating nurses as just a cost to be cut, arguing that hospitals must have staffing flexibility. In other words, cut nurses, raise profits.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So Donald Trump was in East Palestine, Ohio today. Brought some water with him. A couple of pallets of water, some cleaning supplies. I was waiting for another iconic moment of, throwing paper towels at people so they can get to work cleaning that mess up. Because, again, this is another example, and to me, this is another example of Trump's bringing supplies so those folks can clean up the mess that corporate America has created. And my goal in all of this is making sure that they pay every dime to clean up that mess and to make those people's lives whole. And I'm sorry, $1,000, that ain't going to cut it. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on Trump's visit to East Palestine and where things are at the moment. I've asked Clyde Whitaker to come talk with us. He's the chairman and state legislative director for the Ohio State Legislative Board for the Smart Union Transportation Department. That is a mouthful. Clyde, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me.
So, were you in East Palestine today for the big Trump visit?
Was not.
Probably missed the traffic that his visit caused. And when I saw this, I'm going, this is what happens when narcissists get involved, because there's not anything he can really bring to be helpful. I guess a couple of pallets, well, I guess a pallet of water, and some cleaning supplies. But the traffic and the headache and all of the chaos, I got to imagine that's not helpful for the area.
No, that area has been through a lot. We've paid a visit to some of the people there. We did a community outreach several days after the event. Talked to, like I said, several people. It's a very sad situation that those people are in, and it really bothers me to the core on that.
Yeah. Now, as I've been watching the media coverage over the last several days, when you got Republican House members coming out and attacking the administration, because evidently this is all Joe Biden's fault. I had a listener actually tell me that there's a super secret executive order that Biden signed to derail the train, so we would stop talking about balloons. Let's talk about the derailment, because I want the focus to be back where it belongs. It's not on the administration's response. They responded as we respond to anything. But it seems to me that the responsibility and the messaging has been taken away from Norfolk Southern, and again projected somewhere else. The person responsible here, Norfolk Southern.
Absolutely. During this era of PSR, precision scheduled railroading, there's been a lot of cutbacks. All the workforces, different crafts, the maintainers of the equipment, train and engine service, signal department, mechanical forces. Everybody's been cut to bare bones. Everybody's very fatigued right now. The railroads need to hire more people. They need to retain more people. I mean, I've had members with 20 plus years of service leave the industry. I even had one of my legislative reps here in the state, 27 years service. He's 3 years away from meeting retirement. He left because he couldn't deal with it anymore and how unsafe the railroad was being. So.
Now, this is one of those situations that over the summer we were talking to people about the contract fight and all this stuff, and safety kept coming up. And what I find interesting is we're in a moment right now where we're talking about safety procedure. We're talking about, the media, coverage. We're talking about government response. We're not talking about management's decisions. And the fact that you brought up precision scheduled railroading, that should be the focus of this. And this is where, I've had conversations with, Democratic politicians going, the focus is, what this industry does to working people. This is what we need to be talking about, putting them in situations that they can't possibly meet the requirements. I had one of your co-union guys tell me here not too long ago that inspections have been cut down from like 3 minutes down to 90 seconds. How do you inspect anything in 90 seconds?
So what I've learned by talking to people in the mechanical forces during this event, there are over 200 components on one rail car. The industry standard was anywhere from 3 to 4 minutes for inspection of a car. These carmen, they use specialized gauges. I'd spoken to one reporter, and they're kind of like, well, hey, the conductor, he or she can inspect equipment, right? I said, yes, that is correct. But look at it this way. The mechanical forces have the doctorate degree, so to speak. They know the ins and outs of every part on that car, whereas a conductor has, the equivalent of associate's degree. We know the basics and what the railroad teaches us. We know how to do fundamental repairs. We know how to look for major things wrong with the rail car. But mechanical forces in rail yards right now, they've been cut down to nothing. One rail yard here in Ohio, we have conductors do an initial terminal test, class 1 brake test. Typically, that's always been 2 carmen walking the train set and doing the inspection with their gauges. We don't know how to use those gauges. We don't know how to measure the wheel, tread depth of the car, measuring the brake shoe. We don't have those tools of their trade, and that should be them doing that. And the railroads just making a buck and rolling the dice on public safety and even, every railroader's safety for that point.
Yeah. No, I'd read, not too long ago that, I think it was like 2008 to 2018. The train lengths have grown by 25%, and I can't imagine from 18 till now that they haven't grown probably another 25%, and because we're getting longer and longer trains. And I had someone on the show last week say, look, even the way that we're loading the trains is different and causing unsafe conditions. And again, we hear a lot about the word safety, but it comes down to managerial decisions. It comes down to what these companies are forcing on you guys. And again, I don't know how in 3 or 4 minutes or 90 seconds how you inspect anything. Look, I've been a truck driver. I've been in the trucking industry over 30 years. When we do pre-trips, I can't imagine doing a 90-second pre-trip on our brake system, and that's just one little trailer. I don't know how you do it on these big trains.
So the carmen, they're being told 60 seconds or less, and that doesn't even give you enough time to walk around the damn car. Pardon my French there.
No, the big cars, I couldn't walk around it in 90 seconds.
I mean, some of them are upwards to 100 feet. Some of them are 5-car sets that are 250 feet or 300. I have several friends in the trucking industry, and this has come up. One of my buddies like, man, it takes me about 10 minutes or so to do a pre-inspection on my trailer picking up. And I said, man, 1 minute for a rail car, we got hazardous materials in this car. I mean, we should be taking the time for public safety and our own to do this, but there's repercussions if a laborer takes a stand. I mean, they're threatened with subcontractors coming in to take their job. They're threatened with discipline. They're threatened with their livelihoods here. I mean, they got to feed their families and make mortgages. This ain't the way we should be doing business in this country, and this is all corporate greed.
No, and that's the message coming out of this. And no matter how much it costs for Norfolk Southern to clean up this mess, I guess this is the way I should ask this. Depending on how much it costs to clean up this mess, are they going to lose money or save money? Because this all comes down to, minimum, how much risk are we willing to take? Because we keep hearing people say, well, corporations are going to do what's in their best interest. They're not going to put things at risk that's going to cost them more than they make. Now the railroads make a ton of money. This risking your safety or their profits.
So good point on that. Since last summer, I've been collecting data here in Ohio on defect detectors, and it was brought to my attention that a crew had a train with a lot of hazardous materials in it. The defect detector sounded an alarm. The train crew was running short on time, which they only have 12 hours to work. This train's on single track railroad, so you can't pass this train if it stops. You can't get any other trains around it. The line is plugged, especially if they find something wrong. So the conductor took action. He started to walk the train. The chief dispatcher ordered the conductor back to the front end of the train. The conductor and the locomotive engineer traversed 7 more miles going over a body of water to double track mains. So at that point, that conductor was allowed to stop and walk his train. But then here comes another curveball. This crew's running short on time at this point. They got to reach destination. So now we got Amtrak coming down the track at track speed, 50 miles per hour. Let Amtrak check your train out. Okay, first off, Amtrak deals with passenger service. They have passenger equipment. I've been on a railroad 23 years. I don't know what I'm looking at on a passenger car to tell if they have defects unless I see a fire or spark or hear something. So this guy goes by 50 miles per hour. What's he inspecting? A blur? I mean, I don't know if you've ever been on a train, but when you're passing another at that speed, looking out a window in a straight direction, it's a blur.
Yeah, it's you're just going right on by. Yeah, I know.
So,
so that's the inspection?
Yeah. So
Seriously?
So the Amtrak conductor says, "Hey, train looks good. Don't see anything wrong." So this train continues on down the line a little bit more. They get nailed by another defect detector. He walks the train this time. He's allowed to do his job. He's empowered to do his job finally, right? Now, a few things I see wrong with this so far. One, we went across a body of water with hazardous materials. We could have poisoned the water system here, damaged the environment, and put the Amtrak train in danger. Who knows how many passengers were on that? But this chief dispatcher rolled the dice on it, right? We're either going to make a profit today, get this train across the railroad. I'm going to get a little pat on the back. I did a good job, right? That's what upper management's going to tell this chief train dispatcher. So the conductor walks back, finds a couple of handbrakes that were on the rail cars. The bearings were hot, but not as hot to the critical point. But still, in fact, what if? So my take on this, you can find the railroad all day long. It's a drop in a bucket. Whatever number you throw at them, it's a drop in a bucket. They make billions of dollars. Even during the course of a global pandemic, a broken supply chain, they're making a buck. And they're going to continue to make a buck. What we need to focus on here is upper management and managers making terrible decisions. Those people need a personal fine to them, not the rail company, a personal fine to that manager to stop making bad decisions that endanger my membership, the other organization's membership, and the general public overall. You're putting the supply chain in danger. You're putting communities, buildings, property in danger too. And that would cease some of the problems that we've got.
Now, the comments about the braking have come up a number of times, and I don't know. Look, we don't have the official report, but there was some stuff during the Trump era that undid some regulations. We now find in Ohio that they lobbied heavily, to stop any regulation. To me, this is another example of the deregulation crowd, taking risks with all of our health and safety so that these corporations can make a buck. For me, the culprit here is deregulation. It's not about Trump. It's not about the Ohio Republicans individually. It's about all of them. It's about this ideology that corporate America is going to do what's in the best interest, of themselves, because they fear they're going to be sued. But I don't see that as a fear here. As you said, these guys make enormous amounts of money and all the time put us in danger. When do we get the message that maybe deregulation isn't the answer?
Well, that's a very complex question. I think that goes above my pay grade, but something's got to be done here. DOT needs to, take a step. I mean, I understand how lobbyist money works, obviously, and helping people out, should say.
So let me ask you about that. You know how lobbyist money works. I keep getting people, well, the unions got lobby money. The unions are lobbying for this. What's the difference between the money that labor spends on lobbying to keep workers safe and how much management lobbies to not?
Well, typically, if I write a PAC check here on a state level, my max is $500. All right. The railroad's going to do their max contribution in the thousands mark. So, if every union member contributed, I think, $1 a day, we would outspend the railroad sevenfold. But it's a voluntary program, right? And contrary to popular belief, your union dues with our organization does not go toward political funding whatsoever. That's against the law, as far as I know. It's a volunteer fund. So I wish I could drop $1,000 on a legislator and open that door. Yeah. I mean, that's what PAC money does. It opens the door up for a listening ear.
Well, what we know is Norfolk Southern gave $10,000 to Mike DeWine's inaugural campaign. his inaugural festivities, and also I guess like 29 grand in his run for governor. So we know that they're giving them big money, and it's not even a lot when you think about the amount of when these regulations go into place. That does take people off of trains. Because when I was a kid, I remember there were 6, 7, 8 people on a train. They had cabooses back then. Now we've got, well, software.
Right. Yeah, I'm the 6th railroader in my family, so I'm kind of probably the last one, because I'm going to tell my son don't do it.
Yeah. So last line of questioning I've got for you, because ultimately, we want to hold people accountable. These people who are struggling in East Palestine, the environmental degradation and the destruction that's happening, all of this stuff, someone's going to have to pay for it. And sadly, throughout the years of this country, it's usually the taxpayers who get screwed with all of the external costs because of these disasters. How do we hold this railroad accountable?
Well, from what I've read, Governor DeWine, J.D. Vance, I know Sherrod Brown, he will do everything in his power to hold the railroad accountable. It seems like everybody's saying, hey, we're going to hold the railroads accountable. So how do you do that? They're all going to have to stick together and work it out bipartisanship on this one, I think.
Yeah,
so.
It's interesting because as I've been pointing out here the last several days, Republicans are running, they're running cover for the railroad. By saying, look at Buttigieg isn't here, or the president didn't show up. All the resources. Let me ask you this. I know I said the last question, but in the response, I'm looking at how the federal government responded, and they responded as by the letter of the law. When the governor requested something, he got it. When he didn't get it. It seems to me that what's being thrown out is a lot of BS simply to project responsibility somewhere else, so we stop focusing on the fact that this is managerial problem. This is a problem with these railroads.
So with that, and I do agree with that, I think we're missing the big picture here on a lot of things that we can make change on. Right now, the door is open. We have 2 different types of defect detectors, from my understanding. We'll take, for instance, a standard defect detector. They all can have different combinations of technology. And this is a good tool, but it's not always effective. They can scan for hot wheels, bearings, dragging equipment, whatever the case may be. We also have what's called a trending defect detector. These do not send an alarm to the train crew operating the train. It is a silent alarm that goes to a wayside desk at the central dispatching system. And who knows what this person's doing with the data? They're watching this car heat up as it goes down the tracks. If that car goes into a siding waiting for several hours for other trains to pass, it's going to take a while for that car to heat back up. But nobody's telling the train crew about this, that, hey, we see something's going wrong with this car. Let's keep an eye on it. So these cars heat up. We have issues with them. And again, managers are telling these trains to keep going, committing an unsafe act. Yeah. That's not on the train crews. That's on management at that point. But we want to make the right decision. But
at the end of
there needs to be regulation on that.
Again, this comes back to the decisions that are made not on the train, and that's a problem.
Right.
I grew up in an era where if you're moving a vehicle, you're the captain of the ship. You make those decisions, not some pencil pusher in a room somewhere, way away from you where you are. You're the captain of that ship, and we need to get back to that. For me, we should have the Captain of the Ship Act of 2023, so this never happens again. Just my thoughts. But Clyde, I appreciate you taking some time for us, sharing your thoughts. I'd love to have you back again real soon.
Yeah, anytime.
Good stuff. Appreciate the time. Clyde Whitaker. He is the chairman and the state legislative director for the Smart Unions Transportation Division. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1860. That was the day that the shoemakers of Lynn, Massachusetts, walked out on strike. The shoemakers were very concerned over how technology was changing their work. Shoemaking had long been considered a skilled craft. Making shoes was typically done as piecework in the homes of the craftsmen. Often, other family members, including the women of the household, helped to make the shoes. But technological advances transformed the industry. The introduction of the Singer sewing machine in 1852 moved more shoemaking into factories. Many young women went to work stitching at these machines. What was once considered highly skilled work was now transforming into mass production. Then, to make matters worse, in 1857, a depression swept across the nation. Shoemakers saw their wages slashed. In response, on George Washington's birthday, the shoemakers went out on strike. They demanded an industry-wide standard wage. 20,000 workers joined the strike. 20,000 more supported the striking workers at protests and parades. 2 weeks into the conflict, women from the factories took to the streets, joining the strike. But the male shoemakers were weary of joining their cause to that of the women. Predictably, this division aided in causing the strike to falter and fade. Although the strike was not successful, it drew national attention to the plight of workers. During the conflict, presidential candidate Abraham Lincoln spoke out in support of the workers. He said, "I'm glad to see that a system of labor prevails in New England in which laborers can strike when they want to, where they are not obliged to labor whether you pay them or not. I like a system that lets a man quit when he wants to and wish it might prevail everywhere." Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
So interesting Washington Post story today grabbed my attention. You know, we do a lot of social media here on the program. You know, we reach a bunch of people with where we can. And ever since Elon Musk took over Twitter, I've noticed a lot of much more coordinated messaging. And look, I've always said that you've got your bot farms, you've got your troll farms, you've got your Russian propagandists, you've got your, you've got all around, you've got your groups of people who do their messaging. But it's really ramped up now that Musk has taken over. And as the Washington Post points out, quote, accounts pushing Kremlin propaganda are using Twitter's new paid verification system to appear more prominently on the global platform. Another sign that Musk's takeover is accelerating the spread of politically charged misinformation. And you go, yeah. I look at somebody with 2 followers who's got the little blue check mark because they're verified because they paid their $8 or $9 or whatever it is to get the little blue check mark. And interestingly enough, their messages are all the same, and it's that Christian conservative mom from Dubuque, Marjorie 330 characters behind her name. Interesting, a little name and then a bunch of numbers. Generally, something that was automated, something that was created, but it's interesting that they're all on the same page and spreading disinformation. Now, in the past, when people were on my Twitter feed, they would email me, and I get emails from some people, but none of these people actually do. And for me, that's kind of the test on who the trolls are and who the propagandists are and who's actually real. Just an interesting thought. Don't spend the $8 on the blue check mark. Definitely not worth it. Back after this.
The impact of rising seas is already creating new sources of instability and conflict.
Sea level rise set to displace nearly 1 billion people in coming decades, UN warns. Ice coverage of the Great Lakes hits record low. Plus, Biden EPA restores limits on toxic mercury pollution rolled back by Trump.
All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Ohio officials are trying to get folks to come back home, reassuring residents that the air in East Palestine remains safe to breathe. Yes, pay no attention to your lying lungs. The tingling means the air is working.
This is your 14th anniversary Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, happy 14th anniversary of the Green News Report.
Thank you to you too.
Now beginning our 15th year of connecting the climate crisis dots in a way that really no one else in the nation over our public airwaves has done consistently for 14 years now. By the way, 100% listener supported. Congratulations to you, Desiree.
Thank you, and to you as well.
Thank you.
Now, on to the news.
Okay.
A series of new studies warn of the long-term destabilizing impacts of rising sea levels. Data compiled by the World Meteorological Organization shows global sea levels have risen faster on average since the year 1900 than in any century in the past 3,000 years. A new study warns previous projections of sea level rise underestimate the risk, finding that twice as much land in developing nations will be inundated by rising seas than previously predicted.
Not good, although scientists have been underestimating all of these problems for, at least 14 years.
United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres told the UN Security Council late last week that the rate of sea level rise itself is accelerating and warned of widespread impacts, including saltwater intrusion contaminating drinking water supplies. Guterres called rising seas a threat multiplier that will disrupt and destabilize global society. He said unless there is an organized international effort to get ahead of the problem, 1 in 10 people could be driven from their homes in coming decades.
The consequences of all of these are unthinkable. Low-lying communities and the entire countries could disappear forever, and we would see ever fiercer competition for fresh water, land, and other resources.
A different study in Nature Communications warns that in a moderate emission scenario, sea levels will continue rising through at least 2150 and likely thereafter due to the delayed response of the massive Greenland and Antarctic ice sheets. At the current rate, global average sea levels are likely to rise by 3 to 5 feet by 2100. The researchers conclude that because of humanity's delay in cutting fossil fuel use, even if governments achieve their promised emissions cuts under the UN Paris Agreement, quote, it would be insufficient to slow down the rate of global sea level rise.
An average of 3 to 5 feet by the end of the century.
Yep. In other news, widespread devastation in Brazil's Sao Paulo, which was hit with record rainfall of nearly 24 inches in a single day, which triggered deadly flooding and landslides that have destroyed at least 50 homes and killed at least 36 people.
You would think after 14 years I would no longer be surprised by these kind of stories. Amazing.
Several cities in the region have canceled their Carnival Festival, a major source of tourism revenue.
I guess they have.
In the Great Lakes, a new study confirms that ice extent on all of the Great Lakes has hit a record low, even though we are now supposed to be at the peak of ice season. The historical average for mid-February is at least 40% ice coverage on the lakes, but currently it's only 6%. According to NOAA data, ice on the Great Lakes altogether has declined 71% since the 1970s. Meanwhile, taxpayers are funding the fossil fuel industry's destruction. Bloomberg News reports that even as the world's governments are taking action to cut fossil fuel use in the future, governments last year gave a record $1 trillion in taxpayer subsidies to the fossil fuel industry, the main driver of climate change. Combined government subsidies for oil, natural gas, electricity, and coal hit an all-time high in 2022, even as soaring energy prices contributed to crippling inflation.
And even as the fossil fuel companies enjoyed record profits last year.
Finally, some good news for things that breathe. The Biden EPA has reinstated Obama-era regulations limiting toxic mercury pollution from coal-fired power plants that had been stripped away by the Trump administration. Mercury pollution from power plants is a potent neurotoxin that damages brain development in babies and children and causes heart disease in adults.
Well, there you go. After 14 years, one positive story. I'll take it. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So a recent poll conducted by Link Research Partners basically says what we've been talking about for nearly 2 decades here on the program. Working class voters care about what? They care about jobs and the economy. They care about inflation right now. They care about that kitchen table stuff. You know, how they're going to keep a roof over their head, food on the table for the kids. The James Carville, it's the economy, stupid. That's the wheelhouse. And this is where Democrats, I think, need to focus their message much better and jump in the middle of places where maybe they haven't been for a while. Again, far down the list, the culture war outrage candy that, the stuff they give us a daily overdose of. We're here to share some thoughts on maybe how we message this better and how we reunite the country. I've asked my good friend Mike Lux to come talk with us. Mike's the president of American Family Voices. They've got a new piece out on a new strategy out for factory towns and how we reunite America. Mike, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Rick. It's always great to be on your show.
So let's talk about the results of this poll that just out. Accurate assessment, working class issues, our jobs, the economy, how we're going to put food on the table, that kind of stuff. Not so much about that really divisive culture war stuff.
Yeah. Of course I'm biased. I paid for the poll. My organization did. But I think it is accurate because, look, when we've been in these counties, and Rick, you've been with me in these counties. You've gone there, and walked the walk. Most of the folks in these counties are under such stress in their lives because the economy sucks, because of the opioid crisis that's ravaging the communities. All of these things are going on. They don't have time to worry about all the BS. They don't have time to worry about what Tucker Carlson or some crazy person says, because they're focused on just making a living wage and getting through to their retirement with it and having some kind of savings, making sure their kids have a decent life. And it's hard going. In the original poll that we did, over half of the people were telling us that either they or someone in their family in the last few years had lost their job, lost their health care, lost their pension, had trouble with addiction issues, had trouble with mental health issues, had been hurt on the job, and had to take time off because of that. I mean, people are living tough lives in these outside of big cities and outside of the big city suburbs. And I think Democrats, if they're going to win, they need to speak to those issues that really matter to people. And I think most of the rest of it is just fraud.
Yeah.
But if we start speaking to those economic issues, I think Democrats will do a lot better. And I think the whole progressive world needs to refocus in on these counties and these people.
No, in fact, I just had a conversation with a friend not too long ago, talking about the red state, blue state stuff, and and the rural urban divide that's being thrown on us.
Yeah.
And I said, look, Democrats have a lot of responsibility in this. Because, I remember the Clinton era of we're going to get rid of those factory jobs. Everyone's going to get an office job. We're all going to wear white shirts and ties. And that's not the reality for most working people. And then for people who lost their jobs and couldn't get an education or whatever that reason is, we just told them, well, they were lazy and didn't want to work. And this is one of those moments. And I came across this as we went and did our tour. The messaging that Democrats have had is, just bad over the last several years. The Carvel, it's the economy, stupid. That should be the battle cry, making sure that we have an economy that accommodates all working people.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. By the way, I worked for Bill Clinton. I like the guy, and he did some good things, but the trade deals that he did were terrible. A lot of the policies he pursued, and the whole rhetoric, like, the only way to have a good life is to go to college. The only way to to get ahead is be willing to change jobs 8 times in your career. And that's just not the reality for most folks, most folks in America, frankly.
Right. Now, I've been saying, Mike, over the last several months that I think Joe Biden's doing a great job. I think the president is doing an excellent job. I think he's pushing back on a lot of those neoliberal tendencies that even he voted for. So you got to be upfront about the fact that he was part of that. He was, the consensus at the time was, we're going to create these great new jobs, and everyone's going to have a corner office and wear a tie, and it's going to be a great, amazing future. And that trade was the way we were going to stop wars. There was a whole idea around this. And I go back to, and the reason that I can give Clinton and Biden, some pass back then is they really believed they were going to make people's lives better, that by educating and doing those things, they were going to lift people up. I know the Republicans just saw, hey, there's cheap labor overseas, a way for corporations to make a big buck. Let's go. So, this is where I see this. So I'm looking at the president moving towards reshoring manufacturing, investing in the future technologies and having Buy American provisions. And I'm going, this is a transformational moment. This is an opportunity to do exactly what you're talking about. So I guess the question I have for you is, looking at your poll and looking at the study you guys have done, is the president taking your playbook and moving it far enough, fast enough? I see him moving it, but is it fast enough?
Well, time will tell whether it's fast enough, but I do think he is taking the playbook. I said in the report that we published today that I think this is a generational opportunity for Democrats. We just spent the last 2 years passing all kinds of great legislation that's going to help working people. And then when you look at the executive orders and the regulatory things that have happened, you look at the National Labor Relations Board and the things that they are doing, really pushing back hard on the union busting. And you look at this thing about no junk fees. You look at just the array of things, the Buy America provisions in some of these bills. I mean, it really is making a difference. It can make a difference. And as Joe Biden was doing his State of the Union, about 15 minutes in, my wife, Barbara, turned to me and said, did you write this speech for him?
I got the same thing.
I kind of felt like I had, he's really focused on this stuff. He gets it. And people kid about him being Scranton Joe. Scranton's one of those hard hit towns that was hammered by deindustrialization and all those bad trade policies.
Oh boy, was it! I grew up in Cleveland, another place hammered by it.
Yeah. He's going back to his roots, and you're right. He and a lot of other people, made some mistakes back in the day, but I think Joe Biden gets it on a different kind of level. That he's seen what's happened, and he understands that some of those neoliberal policies, many of those neoliberal policies, were mistakes, and he's trying to fix it.
And that's music to my ears, something I've been calling for a long time. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're with Mike Lux, president of the American Family Voices Group, AmericanFamilyVoices.org, the website. If you want to check out their most recent report, A Strategy for Factory Towns, we'll get links out, and you can find it there at the website. Mike, here's the thing. I'm looking at where we are. I see what Joe Biden's doing, and I think it's moving us in a really good direction. But I'm looking at Marjorie Three Names over there in Georgia, Congressman Green saying we need a national divorce, Mike, because we're going to pit the red against the blue, the rural versus the urban, and it's all about tearing us apart. I've been saying what you've got in this report for a while has been the way we reunite, we revive, reunionize this country to move us forward. What are your thoughts when you see someone like Green throwing this? We need a national divorce, Mike. We need to break the country up, slice us up even more than we already are. What do you think about that?
Well, it's interesting to hear this kind of talk, and it's whenever there's a Democrat in the White House, you start hearing people on the right, on the far right, like her, talking about secession, talking about a national divorce, because they don't like the idea of moving forward. They basically want to repeal the entire 20th century.
I've been saying that for a long time.
Yeah, right. They want to repeal the New Deal. They want to repeal the Great Society. They want to take away the Warren Court and the desegregation and all of those things are anathema to the people on the right. And so when they see that someone like Biden is moving us, in the right direction, it scares them. And also because they know it's popular. They see the same polling that we did in our poll that we saw. I mean, these policies that Biden is pursuing are really popular for good reason.
Yeah.
They're providing real jobs. They're raising wages. They're making sure people have better health care. They're making sure people have better pensions. I mean, one of Biden's executive orders restored 3 million pensions to people. So this is popular stuff, and that scares the hell out of these right wingers. They don't want to live in a country like that.
No, and here's the thing, and because we traveled into rural areas and we talked to people all across Iowa. I'll use Iowa as we went to 8 states. Iowa was one of the examples that really stuck out to me, because as we met Mike Franken, who was running for Senate, and J.D. Scholten, who won his state House seat, the both of them, and virtually everybody said, Iowa used to be a strong, moderate Democratic state. It was a hardworking, working class state with working class values. And over the last several years, it's turned into a radical, extreme state where you look at their state house now and the kind of insanity that they're moving through there. Nobody wants ending child labor laws in certain places, giving immunity shields to corporations, destroying education. We can go down the list. But the question is when you go back into those communities, you see that their identities have been stolen. They used to be the place that made stuff. This is an opportunity, and I think Democrats have done a crummy job of messaging. This is an opportunity to reach into those places and say we're bringing help. We're bringing an identity back. I look at East Palestine. There was an opportunity for Democrats to go in there early on, and we're here. Even if the governor wasn't going to ask you to come in, stand at the border and say we're here at the ready. It's bad messaging in my view. Policies are great. I hear people say we love those progressive policies. We love the manufacturing. We love the healthcare. We love the education. It's just, the messaging is way off. So I guess how do we fix that?
Well, I think fixing Democratic messaging is is a hard task. You feel like the guy in Greek mythology trying to push the rock up the hill. I do think that Biden gets it to some extent. He understands in his gut. And hopefully that can translate into the campaign. But I mean, Rick, a lot of Democrats these days are from the two coasts. They're from big cities. They don't really understand the problems of folks in small and medium-sized towns, and it's a disconnect, and we have to like shake up that culture, and get people thinking about these small and mid-sized towns again.
Yeah, I've been saying for a while, Democrats need to adopt a striking worker. Maybe we need to amend that and adopt a rural worker who lost their job, and walk in their shoes for a day, because you go into these communities and look, these are good people. The problem is they've been fed a lot of nonsense. But when it comes down to it, their concerns are the same as anyone else's. We want good jobs, safe neighborhoods, good schools for our kids, opportunities for the future. And for me, that's what we should be talking about. That's the wheelhouse, not the divisive stuff. Be right on the issue, but you don't lead with that. You lead with, I'm going to make your life better, and this is how we're going to move policy to do that. And I think that's what your report here is talking about, and hoping to help move in that direction. So, what are you hoping comes out of this report and this poll? What do you think? What do you think where's it going to go?
Well, what I hope is a renewed focus on economic issues, a renewed focus on working class politics. That we get, and I think they are moving in the right direction, but that we get the Biden White House fully engaged on this stuff. That we get the Biden campaign. I'm hoping that the messaging recommendations that folks like Sherrod Brown and Tammy Baldwin and Bob Casey, in a lot of these states can use those messaging recommendations. I heard from a congressman from a small town outside of Pittsburgh today after we did the report, and was like, this is great, this is perfect. So we can get more members of Congress focused on this kind of message and on these issues. I mean, you look at the most popular issues in our poll, and they're all these issues that Rick, that you talk about all the time on your show. It's like, let's stop wage theft, right? Let's stop union busting. Let's end the stealing people's retirement. It's that kind of thing that I think we need to focus on.
Now let's stick up for the working person. And I'm going to guess it was Chris DeLuzio from out in Western Pennsylvania.
It was actually
the guy who took my advice and took a striking worker to the State of the Union. That's the kind of people we need in Congress.
Absolutely.
And we do. We need to get back into these communities and talking to people. And I'm looking forward to the next Working Class Heroes Tour that'll take us back through all those places we went back during the election last year to talk about this message and preach the good word. But, Mike, I appreciate the time as always. Excellent report. I hope folks will take a look at it. A strategy for factory towns. The good folks over at American Family Voices have put it on AmericanFamilyVoices.org, the website. Mike, thanks so much, buddy.
Thanks, Rick. Great.
Appreciate the time. Again, make sure you check out the website, AmericanFamilyVoices.org. We'll get links out on social media. How you can take a look at that. Going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I was just thinking about when we did our Working Class Heroes radio tour that took us, from Pennsylvania through Ohio, into Michigan, through Indiana into Michigan, into Wisconsin, Iowa. We were all over the place for that month and a it was like a little over 5 weeks we were on the road. And we went into some incredible places and met really great people, held events. And, the common theme kept coming back to, we used to have this identity. This factory was, who this town's heart and soul was. And that factory may have only, employed, 500, 1,000 people. But that town of, 8, 9, 10,000 people, that factory was the economic engine for that community. And what we know is manufacturing jobs have a massive reverberation effect, especially when those factories are unionized. And we went to a lot of those. I was really surprised at, Iowa is a no rights at work state, has been for a very long time. But just how strong the labor movement was and is there, of workers saying, no, we demand to have a voice on the job. We demand a contract that pays good wages. We demand a job that provides health insurance and retirement security. And when that was stripped away from them, not because the unions were there, because that's always the message. The unions made those companies move to China or move to Mexico. No, it was terrible trade deals. It was corporate greed. It was CEOs going, what? We can get slave labor in China? What? We can use Mexican labor that's, a tenth of what we have to, really? And then we can bring that stuff back and not have to pay massive tariffs on it? Oh, sign us up. That means huge bonuses? Absolutely. Screw those communities. Screw those working people. And when you started talking to people in those communities who this happened to, who their identity was, you go into Toledo, Ohio, they were the glass capital of the world. You go into Appleton, Wisconsin, it was the paper capital of the world. You go into, Iowa, the meatpacking plants. You go into, in cities across this country, their identity was this industry, and it was stripped from them. It's not like they lost it. It was taken from them. And that identity, that economy that's still has not recovered. And then to have a messaging machine says, well, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Or the Republican in Ohio who asked, what are you going to do for our town? He told the person, move. Well, they love their communities. They love their home. They love their families. They love their friends and neighbors. They're committed to this. And to have a representative say, just move. Instead of saying, hey, how do we rebuild? How do we attract another anchor? How do we attract more industry? How do we invest in the future? And I think Biden's doing that. And this is where Democrats have got to figure out how to stop talking in paragraphs and get back into bumper stickers. I've been saying for a while, every project that gets out of the infrastructure bill should come with a 20-foot cardboard cutout of Biden, that stupid sticker that they were putting on gas pump of Biden going, yeah, I did that. Start taking credit for stuff. Start promoting the fact that we're making lives better. They don't do it. They just don't. And when you look at the polling is there. It's what the American working class wants. It's what they're starving for, a party that's going to fight for them and fight for their families. And yet what's happened is, Democrats they're on the right side of the issue, but they're pushed into this. Now we've got to be, homogenous and pure on every issue. And I say, look, I'm in favor of people living their best lives. I'm in favor of people being able to do what they want. That should be a life, liberty, pursuit of happiness thing. But we should, bread and butter, jobs. Bread and butter, healthcare for families, education. That should be the bread and butter. when they bring up, oh, well, you're for this. No, I'm for making people's lives better. I'm for moving us forward as opposed to tearing us down and wanting to rip us apart and move us backward. This is where Democrats better figure out their messaging, or we need a party that will. Maybe a labor party. I've had people tell me, Rick, we need a labor party. At the end of it, it's going to come down to us voting. And when working people vote on the issues that are important to working people, we get good policy, which is why Republicans don't want you voting. I'll take a quick break. Right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1860. That was the day that the shoemakers of Lynn, Massachusetts, walked out on strike. The shoemakers were very concerned over how technology was changing their work. Shoemaking had long been considered a skilled craft. Making shoes was typically done as piecework in the homes of the craftsmen. Often, other family members, including the women of the household, helped to make the shoes. But technological advances transformed the industry. The introduction of the Singer sewing machine in 1852 moved more shoemaking into factories. Many young women went to work stitching at these machines. What was once considered highly skilled work was now transforming into mass production. Then, to make matters worse, in 1857, a depression swept across the nation. Shoemakers saw their wages slashed. In response, on George Washington's birthday, the shoemakers went out on strike. They demanded an industry-wide standard wage. 20,000 workers joined the strike. 20,000 more supported the striking workers at protests and parades. 2 weeks into the conflict, women from the factories took to the streets, joining the strike. But the male shoemakers were weary of joining their cause to that of the women. Predictably, this division aided in causing the strike to falter and fade. Although the strike was not successful, it drew national attention to the plight of workers. During the conflict, presidential candidate Abraham Lincoln spoke out in support of the workers. He said, "I'm glad to see that a system of labor prevails in New England in which laborers can strike when they want to, where they are not obliged to labor whether you pay them or not. I like a system that lets a man quit when he wants to and wish it might prevail everywhere." Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
No one needs another outrage to worry about, but here's one that could literally be your last worry. Our hospitals are killing us. Not that the staffers are going room to room snuffing out patients, of course, but hospital owners and top executives are nonetheless killing thousands of ill Americans entrusted to their care. They are doing it by deliberately short-staffing their facilities and shortchanging sick and injured people they're richly paid to serve. At the core of this outrage is a fatal structural flaw in our healthcare system, namely that these are no longer our hospitals. Instead of being public or nonprofit entities for the common good, focused squarely on patients, hospitals today tend to be private operations controlled by corporate profiteers. Pitting patients against profits is no way to run a hospital, for it means money will ultimately rule over health and over life itself. Ask a nurse. These dedicated professionals are the solid pillars of American health. More than doctors and way more than administrators, nurses make a hospital function, providing the primary care and constant on-site monitoring that are the essence of an ethical, healthy system. Yet, thousands have already fled the work they love. Another third plan to leave this year, and thousands more are going on strike. Why? Because the profit system demands massive staff cuts, leaving way too few nurses to meet the basic needs of patients, causing burnout among nurses and unnecessary deaths of people they care for. A damning 2021 study revealed that forcing fewer nurses to tend to an ever larger caseload effectively killed more than 4,000 New York hospital patients in the previous 2 years alone. This is Jim Hightower saying, yet the corporate powers insist on treating nurses as just a cost to be cut, arguing that hospitals must have staffing flexibility. In other words, cut nurses, raise profits.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So we're coming up on the 10th anniversary of the oral arguments of the Shelby versus Holder Supreme Court case. You remember that? You remember how we just that voting rights stuff? Not so important. Let the states decide how we're going to go back to blocking certain groups of people from voting and putting massive obstacles in the way. Because hey, why not? But this is an important anniversary. It's coming up, I guess, next week. And to talk about this, I've asked Kathy Fang to come share some thoughts. She's the National Redistricting Director over at Common Cause, commoncause.org, the website. They're out talking about why this is so important. Kathy, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks, Rick, for having me.
So why is this a big deal? For most people aren't hung up in the legal cases and all this. Why is this a big one?
I mean, the short answer is that when the Supreme Court essentially obliterated one of the major tools of the Voting Rights Act to protect people's voting rights, it opened the door for a slew of restrictive voting laws that states pounced on in order to stop people from voting. And everything that we think of as creating more access for people who are ready to vote and eligible to vote, like early voting, like same-day registration, voter identification, it opened up the states to be able to pull all of that back. And not only that, they also passed laws that allowed for much easier purging of lists of voters, oftentimes capturing people who might have similar names, like Rick Smith, right? Yeah. Some Rick Smith out there might have done something, and you find out when you show up to the polling place that your name's been removed from a list of eligible voters, and now you've got to jump through multiple hurdles to be able to cast a ballot. So in 2013, 10 years ago, the Supreme Court was making this decision about whether to pull back on the Voting Rights Act, and what they ultimately did was not just harm the rights of those people that they were considering in Shelby County, but they opened up the door for the House of Democracy essentially to be burned down.
No, and this is another one of those moments where you ask the question, how was it before our Supreme Court decided that they were going to, because again, John Roberts during his confirmation said he was going to call balls and strikes. He believed in decided law. You guys got a funny word, stare decisis or something along this thing that says, hey, I believe in the law of yesterday. I'm not going to just completely overturn things. And yet this is another example of the Roberts Court, just going, screw the past. Yeah. We're making new
activist
law.
Court deciding on its own to reinterpret laws that had been adopted. The Voting Rights Act was adopted in 1965, right? And every 10 to 15 years or so, they were required to renew it. So Congress had to go through a process of looking at it, deciding if we had solved the problem of racism or not, found sufficient evidence for bipartisan, near unanimous votes of Democrats and Republicans to adopt and re-adopt the Voting Rights Act again and again, always, in fact, under Republican administrations, signed into law by Republican presidents. And yet the Roberts Court in 2013 reviewed a case coming out of Shelby County, Alabama, and decided that they were going to strip the Voting Rights Act of one of its most important tools. And so let me just explain that for a second. The Voting Rights Act has essentially two sides to it. One that provides preventative protection. Let's think of that like a smoke detector, right? That's sections 4 and 5. And then another that provides reactive correction, section 2. That's more like a fire extinguisher, right? And what the Supreme Court decided in 2013 was we're going to get rid of the fire alarm. As Justice Ginsburg said at the time, it's like saying, it's not raining right now, and so I don't need this umbrella. I get rid of it, right? Or I think the more apt analogy is I'm standing under an umbrella. I'm dry. Why do I need this? I'm just going to throw this thing away, right? And the reality is that what the Voting Rights Act, Section 4 and 5, that was gotten rid of in Shelby County in that case, what it was doing was before a bad law was enacted and put into place, you could go to the court and ask them to review it, and the court would say if there was a discriminatory impact that could be identified, they would stop that bad law from going into place. So voter identification, strict voter identification laws, voter purging, elimination of all of these accessible voting laws that states had. If states were going after that, the court could stop them and say, you can't go that far. And by removing that fire alarm protection, we essentially now have to allow the fire to happen and then come in afterwards, ask the court to extinguish it, right? That's
after the damage is done.
After the damage is done. And so the minute that the Shelby County decision happened, multiple states ran to pass laws, right? And in North Carolina, as an example, the state legislature passed a law immediately after Shelby County came out, removed their same-day registration, limited their early voting, put in restrictive voting ID laws, and then it took another 3 years before the court finally decided that this was unlawful and essentially ordered it to be repealed. But the problem was is that you'd already had elections, multiple elections under those restrictive voting laws, and people had their voting rights stripped from them, until we could finally find justice in the courts. And that takes time.
Yeah. And here we are again with another Supreme Court case about to be decided, this Moore versus Harper case. Because as I understand, the Shelby County case was basically ended pre-clearance. So you had all of these different areas doing all this chicanery, like moving polling places, all kinds of stuff, specifically for certain groups of people to not have an easy time of voting or not to be able to vote at all. And now where's this Moore versus Harper going to take us? As you said, this is this is doing away with the fire alarm. Is this taking the extinguisher away?
Oh, this is not just taking the extinguisher away. This is saying we're going to dismantle the fire department, right? This is, you've got a 5-alarm fire going on. The legislature decides that it wants to take away people's voting rights. And now the legislature in Moore v. Harper is asking the Supreme Court to say, hey, we don't want any supervision from the state courts anymore. They shouldn't be allowed to tell us what we can and cannot do when it comes to federal elections. And so they could gerrymander in congressional elections. They can pass all sorts of laws that would restrict voting when it comes to congressional elections or the election for a president. And they're basically saying state courts should not be the boss of them.
Wow.
So we are in a situation where,
Hold on. These are the states' rights people, right?
These are the states' rights people.
These are the people who keep preaching us about states' rights, saying, wait a second, we're going to let... is this an admission that they know that the U.S. Supreme Court is bought and paid for already?
I think this is essentially cherry-picking their venue. And it is interesting that it's at the state level, many state courts have put the brakes on these restrictive voting practices because they have seen through how self-serving and partisan those efforts are and how discriminatory they are against Black voters and other voters of color. And so they've actually put the brakes on them time and time again. And what's astounding is that the state legislatures know that perhaps the last permission organization or entity that's going to give them permission to do what they want to do is the U.S. Supreme Court. And so they are asking the U.S. Supreme Court to obliterate the checks and balances that have been built into our U.S. Constitution since the founding of this nation and say that state courts shouldn't be the boss of them. And frankly, they don't want anybody to be the boss of them. They should be able to pass laws without any review. And we all know what kind of road we're going to go down if we allow this kind of tyranny of power to happen with one branch of government.
Wow, scary, scary stuff. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show here with Kathy Fang. She's the National Redistricting Director at Common Cause. CommonCause.org is their website. You can check out another website, moreharper.org. Going to explain exactly what the Moore versus Harper case is and maybe have some actions to get involved in. This is one of these moments, though, Kathy, where I'm going, everybody I talk to says, we want everybody to vote. Yet when we have politicians choosing who gets to vote, shouldn't that make us angry?
We should absolutely be angry. We should demand that change needs to happen. We need to use our ballot as we have it to not only hold those politicians accountable, but also to change the laws so that they open up access. They don't close and restrict the right to the ballot, because that's what our country was founded on. Whether you are somebody who came here with your family at the founding times, you were here before colonists came, or you are a new immigrant. The fundamental idea of America that we hold up as a beacon to the world is that we are a democracy that values the rights of people, we the people, of the people, by the people. And the idea that somehow we would hand over all of our powers to be able to elect and choose our form of government to a group of elite electeds, right, to cement their power to never be challenged by the people is un-American.
Yeah, but here's the weird thing, because you're telling me there's a group of folks who are wanting to hold people from voting, erecting all of these barriers, purging people, passing restrictive voter ID laws, especially for those kids. But you got the other side who are saying, it's too loose. It's too loose, Kathy. We've got, 15 gazillion illegals coming in here and they're voting and there's all this fraud. And it seems like they're kind of trying to muddy the waters on the messaging front. So again, how do we divide the reality from the myth? How do we find out what's really going on when there's so much BS being thrown at us?
Yeah, there definitely is a lot of misinformation that's going out there about somehow the specter of fraudulent voting. And what we found time and time again from independent studies that are conducted by universities, researchers, even bipartisan Republican and Democratic, electeds who go out there to look for where there might possibly be fraud, they're finding 0 cases. And the only instances that you find are usually political operatives, unfortunately, by Republicans, right? Because one of the most prominent examples is in North Carolina, where a Republican operative went around collecting people's ballots from people's mailboxes and then writing the answers in on their behalf. It is cynical political operatives who are committing fraud, not everyday voters. And the crazy thing is that this is an example of politicians cutting off their nose to spite their face, because it will come back and bite them.
Yeah.
I guarantee you that voters will not accept it. And when they see through the lies and realize that their power is about to be taken away, people will turn out to vote. People will demand their rights, and we will hold these politicians accountable.
No, you're so right on this. And it's interesting to watch, Donald Trump and the guy who ran for governor here in Pennsylvania, Doug Mastriano, now backtrack on mail-in balloting. Now they seem to be, we should be in favor of it now. And look, I want everybody to be able to vote. I want the mass of the people, because the only way this experiment works, this wonderful experiment of the United States works, is if the governed, all of us, have a voice, and that voice is heard at the ballot box. Once you start fiddling with this, once you start putting restrictions on who can do what, where, why, and how, we got problems. And it's borne out in the rhetoric that we see every day. I can't tell you how many people tell me, we shouldn't let those kids vote. No, we need to raise the voting age back to 21. I'm going, that's insanity. But again, it's the messaging that we hear.
I think that what we need to remember is that there are some people who will stoke division and fear in order to be able to hold on to power. But what I'm reminded of is that my daughter, who is 16 years old, and her friends are very attuned to the world around them, the politics, and they take a very non-cynical view. They want to make sure that their generation has a world that they can live in, a ballot that's going to be meaningful, things that they are going to care about and be able to live in a healthy and caring society. And that means for my generation, I need to fight to protect their right to vote, because the government that we leave behind for them needs to serve them, be representative, and be accountable. And if we start pulling back on this and that just to gain some kind of momentary partisan advantage, all we're doing is leaving a fundamentally broken system that will go down the path of tyranny for our next generation. And I'm not afraid of a bad president or two. What I'm afraid of is that we don't have an American democracy anymore.
No, you're so spot on. But it's in the rhetoric, though, Kathy. I mean, the reality is you've got these original intenters who want to go back to what they believe the original intent was, which just white landowning males over 21 voting, and the rest of you sit down and shut up.
Yeah. The crazy thing is that when it comes to Moore v. Harper, I don't always agree with the founding fathers, but on this one, they had it right. They were always afraid of putting power into one branch and one branch alone. They created a system of checks and balances between the judicial, the legislative, and the executive branch. Right. They also created checks and balances between state and national. And at every step of the way, they sort of said, we don't trust any one entity to hold all the power. We need to make sure that we distribute that and that each one is balancing the other. And in this case, Moore v. Harper, we could go down the wrong road of allowing for one branch to be all powerful and absolute. And I think the biggest fear that I have is that if we go down that route, we will not be able to go back, because you will unleash the self-serving and reinforcing nature of power. And once that power is concentrated in a few people's hands, we will not see a country that we recognize anymore.
No, it's frightful what the 6 dictators in robes could possibly do. And we've got to fight back. So the question is what do people do? Is there anything we, the people, can do in this moment? Is there any pressure to bear? Is there any organization? Are there any, what can be done? Because I fear, and I don't know if you'll agree with me or not, I fear the outcome is already decided. It's like a lot of these cases that we hear. There's a case in front of the court on making unions pay for losses to companies during a strike. I know where that's going. Workers are going to get screwed again. Is this a case where you think voters are going to get screwed again? And how do we stop it?
Here's the thing. This American experiment has time and time again shown that when people don't feel discouraged, when they don't just sort of lay down, when we are vigilant and when we choose to do the smallest of things, which is exercising the vote, we can make great things happen, right? We've seen that in Pennsylvania when people came together, the turnout increased, and you can have your choice of electeds and you can have your choice of laws, right? You can affect change. In Pennsylvania, it was the state where we were able to challenge the way the lines were drawn, and the courts agreed that there was a partisan gerrymander and redrew the lines in a fair way. And we actually have seen those kind of wins in state after state. And I think that even though we might feel sometimes downtrodden and maybe even cynical about the possibility of change, I think when we turn out, we can see amazing things happen. And that is, as you said, Rick, Democrats, Republicans, independents alike. The key thing is that we don't take that power for granted and we give up and sort of say, it's the stars have already determined our fate and we can't possibly change it because, the politicals have already put the fix in. No. This government is of the people, by the people, and for the people. And we have shaped it in the past, and we've reshaped it when necessary. When we needed to fight in the Civil War and then create the 14th and 15th Amendments, we did. And then when we needed to come back and fix that with the Voting Rights Act, we did. And again, our country has been reforged into a more perfect union by people coming together and demanding change.
I'm ready to get in the streets and start mobilizing today. And I hope folks will. This is very important. And I hope people will check out the website, moreharper.org. We'll get links out on social media. I can take a look at this as the 10th anniversary of the Shelby County versus Holder arguments come upon us. And this Moore versus Harper case. But Kathy, I appreciate you taking some time explaining this. One of the best analogies I've heard on the fire extinguisher and the fire. I hope folks take that to the cooler tomorrow and start spreading the word. But Kathy Fang, I appreciate the time.
Thanks so much, Rick. You have a good evening.
You as well. I appreciate it. Again, make sure you check out the website, moreharper.org. We'll get links out on social media. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1968, and striking sanitation workers staged a sit-in at the City Council meeting in Memphis, Tennessee. The striking workers were members of AFSCME Local 1733. They had been on strike for 10 days. Their demands included union recognition, a pay increase, a grievance procedure, and end to workplace discrimination. Also at issue was workplace safety. February 1st, 1968 was a rainy day. Two black sanitation workers, Eckel Cole and Robert Walker, sought shelter from the heavy rain in the only place city rules allowed them to be, in the back of their garbage truck with the trash. Tragedy struck, and both men were crushed to death due to faulty equipment. The strike started soon after. At the City Council sit-in, hours passed with neither side backing down. As the hours wore on, the union brought in sandwiches for their members. Finally, the City Council capitulated, but the mayor of Memphis still refused to recognize the union. The sanitation workers' struggle garnered the attention of civil rights leaders, including Dr. Martin Luther King. Dr. King came to Memphis to support the striking workers. While on the trip, King was assassinated coming out of the Lorraine Motel. As the country mourned Dr. King's death, the strike wore on, lasting 65 days before the city settled under heavy pressure from Washington, D.C. Memphis officials met most of the strikers' demands. During the strike, the black sanitation workers carried a sign that read simply, "I am a man." Pickets with this simple, dignified, and powerful statement became one of the iconic images of the civil rights movement. The slogan is still used today at civil rights and labor marches. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2. So remember, Republicans are the party of pro-life. At least that's what they tell us. Remember, they're all about the pro-life. It's they care about the babies. They love the children. They love the children. Love themselves some children. Except for, I guess, this representative from Alaska. Representative David Eastman is his name. You may know he was one of the Capitol rioters, also an oath keeper. So, yeah, interesting character. Evidently, he made some bizarre kind of idiotic. I don't actually know which word would fit here. Let me lay the scene. So they were having a hearing, a committee hearing they were discussing a presentation on preventing child abuse and how to save money in the long run. Because there's problems with this. There's a presentation by this Alaska Children's Trust Fund. They're a nonprofit group who, were saying, look, this is our plan and all this. Well, Representative Eastman thought it was the right time to, I'm just going to read what he said. Quote, in this case where child abuse is fatal, obviously it's not good for the child, but it's actually a benefit to society because there aren't needs for government services and whatnot throughout the child's life. Whoa. That's the right response. I went with but again, this is love the babies. He didn't back down, doubled down saying talking dollars. Now you've got a $1.5 million price tag for victims of fatal child abuse. It gets argued periodically that it's actually a cost savings because that child is not going to need any government services that might otherwise be entitled to receive and need based on growing up in this type of environment. So poor kids are okay to be murdered by child abuse, by their parents or by others. But why? Oh yeah, so we won't have to give them food stamps or an education or you fill in the blank. Now remember, this is a guy who's against abortion, was endorsed by the Alaska Right to Life people. The people who said every life matters. This is folks. Again, against abortion, but I guess in favor of killing a child after it's born. Now, I used to say, they cared about the fetus, they cared about the fetus, inside. As soon as it popped out, they didn't care. This is going, don't care. So Representative David Eastman the good Republican from Alaska. Blank you. I mean, and I guess there's something telling in this for me, because I've said a million times, these people don't give a tinker's damn about kids. What they care about is controlling women and their bodies, and cheap labor. Cheap labor. And if we kill a couple along the way, saves us some money anyway. They're going to be lazy. Wow. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Wherever you find your favorite podcast, you'll find ours. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.